After Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was sworn in as the nation's next health secretary, Arizona State Senator Janae Shamp, who is a nurse, says she's ready to support his version of the Department of Health and Human Services.
The corruption that exists has a lot to do with more of the federal system on how things are mandated, and it's always about money. And I think that that's been very much exposed, and I'm looking forward to it being reformed.
Kennedy says the first thing he'll do is investigate America's problem with chronic illnesses. The White House press secretary told Fox News that President Trump would sign an executive order creating a Make America Healthy Again commission.
And said that Trump would direct Kennedy to investigate this chronic crisis plaguing our country. ABC News senior national reporter Anne Flaherty joins us this morning from Washington with 3 things to watch as RFK takes the HHS helm. What are those 3 things, Anne?
Well, first and foremost, I think what we're going to see is him coming out of the gate with something on the more popular end. Trump had signed this Make America Healthy Again mandate and it's setting up this commission. I think one of the things they could look at are some of the dyes, the ingredients that we put into ultra-processed foods. Red dye 40, for example, hasn't been studied for 20 years. Manufacturers say it's safe, but, it's never actually been tested to be safe. There's not a lot of evidence one way or the other. So that's something that I could see him throwing up and say, yeah, let's set up a commission. Let's do something like this. I think the second thing that you're going to see is possibly a look at these mandates across the states. All 50 states have passed laws to say you have to have vaccines before you put your kids in public schools. Health researchers say that's very important to prevent outbreaks of measles and so forth. I think that you're going to see President Trump support Kennedy in saying, well, let's maybe take a look at that. You'd have to do it through HHS and education, but possibly changing that schedule. That would cause a big uproar. A lot of people would be opposed to that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that he pursues. And then, of course, there's something called transgender protections in hospitals and medical settings. President Barack Obama and Biden had both defined sexual discrimination as to include LGBTQ people. I think we're going to see a rollback of that and to provide more exemptions for religious liberty. So, there are a lot of ways he can kind of have his hands in things, but it's all still to be determined.
And I don't think Democrats would oppose all of those things. Maybe the studies on food dyes. My brother's girlfriend's from Italy, and she's like, I can't believe you Americans put all this stuff in your food. But what kind of pushback can we expect? And do congressional Democrats really have any tools in their toolbox that would be effective in fighting RFK Jr.?
Well, the answer is they don't necessarily because they're in the minority, and Congress has not been necessarily effective in standing up to Trump so far on even things that some have alarmed some Republicans. So I would say that on something like food policy, I do think what you're going to get is a big pushback from the industry. So if you remember back into the Obama administration, it was Michelle Obama that tried to make school lunches healthier. She just wanted to add more whole grains, and she was widely mocked by Republicans. I remember Sonny Perdue, who was the agriculture secretary at the time under Trump, coming into the school lunches and saying, if you don't make it taste good, the kids are just going to throw it out. And he was drinking chocolate milk and saying, I like the extra sugar in it. Well, we do have some chronic illnesses in America. We do have too much added sugar in our food supply. The question, though, is are we the country that's going to mandate that of food manufacturers? Are we going to, Bloomberg tried that in New York City when he tried to get rid of, to put limits on soda, and people really, really pushed back. So I think you are going to find some common ground with a lot of Democrats. And, there are people on the far left who are very skeptical of vaccines and the food supply and on the environmental side. And they could join forces with the RFK movement, as we've already seen them align themselves with Trump. But I think that it's going to be an interesting fight on the practicality of how do you do this? How much regulation do you put into our food industry?
Recently we saw that there have been some pockets of measles outbreaks in the United States. I think it's 5 states so far. And this is largely to unvaccinated kids. It's unvaccinated kids going to school and spreading the disease. So does RFK Jr., does he fall on the side of, yeah, fine, send your unvaccinated kids to school?
At a time like this.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly what he said, is that, he is for medical freedom. And he has said, I'm not going to take away your vaccines. But if you look at all of his comments in the totality, what he's also saying is, I don't believe in mandates. And that can get a little bit tricky because in all 50 states, we do have mandates for kids to go to school. And really, most states only provide exemptions for deeply held religious beliefs. But there are very few religions that would actually oppose vaccination. So a lot of parents who are kind of swimming in this, misinformation online, and I've gone down this path and looked at it. It can be very compelling if you don't understand how good studies are done, and if you don't take a skeptical mindset to it. It really can convince you that, maybe I should hold off on getting my child vaccinated. And if you talk to people, particularly a lot of these senators who ended up ultimately confirming him, a lot of them grew up when measles and polio were a big threat, and they remember childhood friends being, paralyzed or injured from those viruses. So it's almost like we've done too good of a job of preventing these illnesses, and then people aren't seeing them in their everyday lives. But I do think that one thing that Kennedy can do is really cast a lot of doubt on the safety and efficacy of vaccines and really undermine a lot of the confidence, and we could see more outbreaks.
That is ABC News senior national reporter Anne Flaherty.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.